Today I'm speaking with Daz Rawlins from Thales, and I'm so glad that you could join me today on Aerial Views, Daz. And Daz is in a new role at the company for the last 3 months, and he is managing director of Airspace Mobility Solutions. So really excited to have you here, and good luck in the new role.
Thank you, Claudia.
So let's start with that new role, and tell me, what are the things that you find most exciting and interesting about the topics that you're working on now for Thales?
Oh my goodness. Well, right now I feel like I've got one of the most exciting business lead jobs in Thales. The Airspace Mobility Solutions business, or AMS, is part of the Land and Air Systems Global Business Unit, and it works really closely with the Surface Radar business line. What we're essentially doing in the UK is taking these two really established business lines and creating a business environment where the whole is certainly greater than the sum of the parts. When we combine this Thales capability and strengthen the strategic partnerships we have with the likes of NATS, the National Air Traffic Service, and our existing joint venture Aquila, we are potentially creating something really, really special. And I've been given the real privilege of managing AMS UK and taking the business to the next chapter and hopefully the next level.
That's great. Let's start with the basics, though. So ATM and UTM, because we have to manage all this traffic. So looking at what we have today, what do you think are the biggest challenges of integrating ATM and UTM?
Okay, well, this might be taking a simplistic view. However, I think the biggest challenge is quite easy to describe. What we essentially require is a safety-first mindset, and a mindset which moves the narrative of air traffic management to one of airspace management, addressing the requirements of every airspace user. So when we talk about ATM-UTM integration, we're really referring to the providers of these systems being able to share situational awareness and flight information with each other. In other words, an element of interoperability where every airspace user can operate safely. Let's unpack that a little. Right now, established ANSPs have fantastic systems in place which work perfectly well for crewed aircraft. Now they need to adapt and become accustomed to UTM systems where technologies are developed in an agile cloud environment. In fact, these cloud-based services will play a dominant role in future use space. So the challenge becomes how to ensure the safe separation of two air vehicles. One of those, perhaps a drone, and the other a crewed aircraft, but both using different management systems. As we seek to address the interoperability, a systems-to-systems approach will need to be taken to create an ecosystem which covers areas such as regulatory, infrastructure, mission planning, secure connectivity, cybersecurity, and critical area protection. And geofencing is only part of the solution here.
So this is no small challenge. There's a lot that has to be done here. And it's interesting. One thing I'll mention, I was recently at Amsterdam Drone Week, and I would say just really in the last month, I've started hearing a different view from these constituencies that you've mentioned. In the past, the ANSPs, the ATM side say, well, it's all about safety and we can't go fast and we have to ensure all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. And the UTM side says, but we have to go faster, it's all about innovation. And just recently am I hearing those two constituencies say, okay, we need to find a middle ground. We can't chuck out everything that's gone on for the last 100 years in ATM. We need to learn from them and we need to find a way to work together. So, maybe you have some thoughts on how Thales can help with that.
Okay. Specifically for ATM and UTM, or would you like to move on to urban air mobility? Perhaps I think maybe urban air mobility might. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So look, urban air mobility in itself is quite a really interesting sector that's developing, and I feel what we've seen is an explosion of startups and SMEs who are driving urban air mobility, shaping the dynamic UAS market that you just described. I think that's brilliant. However, there is a real need for large organizations like Thales to address some of the more holistic challenges before UAM becomes a societal norm. So upscaling UAM is going to require some of the elephants in the rooms to be addressed, such as certification. And we can draw upon Thales's safety and certification experience in ATM and crewed aviation. There's also security accreditation, and that's a Thales core business, and a unified approach to ATM and UTM. And Thales is well positioned to adopt a true systems integrator role here. Now, the UAM ecosystem is extremely complex. It's got diverse stakeholders, and they're all playing in a really nascent and highly disruptive market. The missing pieces of the jigsaw need to be highlighted. For example, a secure and high-capacity digital spine that's going to connect the regulators, the ANSPs, the UTM service providers, and operators, and the infrastructure, and this does not yet exist. So really, to draw your initial observation to life, to bring that to life, we really are working in a complex environment, but that ecosystem approach to addressing some of the challenges, and then using organizations such as Thales really to bind some of those component parts together is probably essential for the future.
I like your analogy, the digital spine. I think I might steal that and reuse it. It's really great. But I think it's also interesting, the systems integrator role for Thales. And so it looks like I know you already are on the UTM side working with a lot of startups. So it sounds like you see that continuing and growing as we move into the UAM discussion. Yeah,
most definitely. As a systems approach and mindset, that ecosystem approach, looking at all the component parts and drawing them together, and creating that that rich picture where we achieve our end goal.
So I know from looking at your bio that you have an extensive amount of military experience. So I'm wondering if there are some lessons learned that you're bringing with you from introducing new technologies during that time in your career, that you can share with us kind of how you can leverage that in the world of Thales.
Oh, gosh. Well, during my time in the Royal Air Force, I started, first of all, as a navigator and then a pilot. And I was lucky enough to fly on the Global Tactical Air Transport Fleet, which was reliant on a robust ATM to get from A to B. And quite often in difficult circumstances. During some of those global operations, it was really common for military aircraft and military UAS to operate in the same corridors and alongside each other. So you could say I have actually operated in integrated UTM and ATM space. Now, as an end user, also a capability sponsor in the Air Force, and now a business lead, I feel I can see the component parts of the challenge through different lenses. Now, most of all, I love the air environment, and I've got a passion for aerospace advancement, particularly if that advancement drives us towards a more sustainable future. Regarding the challenges, though, I'd say one of the key challenges is where the agile digital environments of UTM advancement meets the highly regulated environment of ATM. And there's a risk that here processes could really slow down progress. I saw this in MOD, but the capability development process worked really well in MOD was called the Urgent Operational Requirements, or UOR. And here, I really felt that risk was managed at a more appropriate yet empowered level. So for integrated airspace to become the norm, I think there's going to need to be a more sensible approach to risk management. No easy tasks, really, in a highly regulated, safety-critical environment, right?
I think that's all really interesting, and I think you have some great lessons learned that you're going to bring over to this role. So let's talk about when UAM is actually going to happen. Maybe you can share your opinion, and it's okay if it's your personal opinion. It doesn't have to be the Thales opinion. When do you think UAM becomes a reality? And then maybe from the Thales side, are you working in any proof of concepts or trials that are helping to bring that to be a reality?
Yeah. Well, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just, dial up on our app and call Uber Air to come and pick us up out of our doorstep and take us to where we're going? I do feel that UAM platforms are being developed at an extraordinary speed. There are companies like Skyport, Volocopter. They're continuously announcing new platforms and test environments. The real challenge, though, as with commercial drone operators, I think, is airspace integration underpinned by an acceptable operational safety case. Now, I think the general consensus is that the proof of concept operations are going to start operating next year, probably on a small scale and probably in remote or segregated airspace. These are kind of already started in the USA and the Middle East. But going back to the previous point, the priority right now has to be one of certifying the air vehicles for operations. So sustained operations then, I think we could looking for sustained operations from 2030, when a scheduled service might be likely to operate between key regional airports, for example. I think we can assume the early flights to be piloted, but we can see greater automation through technology that will enable a roadmap to lead to full autonomy. I don't think full autonomy is going to happen until possibly the middle of the next decade at the earliest. There is a massive but to this, though. In order to achieve the timelines, we've got to accept that the UAM market requires and demands huge investment, and investment in infrastructure, for example, drone ports, landing sites, communication, surveillance, safety, reversionary flight zones, recharging sites. But the price is really something that's been cited as a £9 billion market by 2028. That's what we should be aiming for.
And we can't forget getting the public to actually fly in one. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done there too.
A societal aspect for sure.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd be quite happy to do that.
You're ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
Just building on the autonomous versus automated. What I've heard a lot of people say is, okay, that it starts with a piloted fashion, as you said, and then we probably see autonomous more for cargo than for flights that have people on them. And maybe we actually never do have autonomous flights with people, but we do have something that's more automated. So think of it in the context of the autopilot today and how much of the flying the plane does versus the pilot in today's world. So getting to that perspective. Any thoughts from your side on that topic?
Yeah, I think you raised a really interesting point there, actually, Claudia, because one of the things that I used to, in the last business I had in training simulation for Thales, I tried to switch the narrative as we were creating training solutions for, the future air crews of the world, from one of thinking about a pilot and an aircraft to one of the systems and the systems operator. And really what that does is it starts to leverage the power of technology with us thinking in a slightly different way, with a different mindset. Now, if you look at, take the Royal Air Force, for example, and look at their future roadmap, we've already got potential uncrewed vehicles, air vehicles that are being produced. I think the 6th generation fighter that's both Europe and the UK are looking at in different programs will have potentially an uncrewed and a crewed variants there. Equally, the support trainers leading into that will also have that. In the commercial world, single pilot operations, so perhaps I think will be the first stage for when we go overseas on our holidays. We're very used to probably a pilot and a co-pilot, or captain and a co-pilot, first officer. I think the first stage of moving towards autonomy will be to reduce that down to one, potentially using technology, advancements in autopilot technology to fill the gap there, and then we'll move on. But I do agree with you. The last to go fully autonomous, to take full autonomy, will certainly be passenger flying. Yeah. But there might be a bit of a difference between the risk acceptance of me willing to get into that Uber Air outside my front door and go from A to B, where I'm entirely in control of the decision that I make, as opposed to maybe getting into a passenger airliner and crossing the Atlantic with nobody there in front.
I have to think about that as I go on my next transatlantic holiday. Anyway, thank you so much for spending time with me today. It was really interesting to speak with you, and I'm looking forward to catching up in the future and hearing about your first 6-9 months in the role.
Oh, fantastic, Claudia. Thank you very much for the time today. Thank you.